Starters! Start your engines!
Pick the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. Can't see him, but he talks to me.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Whoobazoo Radio Network. Welcome to another edition of Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour or more as we break down the Ford Championship weekend for the NASCAR Series and touch on all the other racing news in the world. Before we get started, let me introduce you to the panel I have tonight. My good friends Gray Warren and Richard Youden are both here with me. Gray, Richard, how are you?
How you doing tonight? How you doing tonight, guys?
Yeah, very good. Hope everybody else is good.
All right, so
Great.
It's a long season in NASCAR coming to a head there in Miami. And sometimes the world is a cruel place where things don't work out and people are disappointed. But for whatever reason, this thing ended just as it should have. The guy that won the most races, the team that was dominant for most of the year, ended up winning the thing. And it's just a great Cinderella story for Martin Truex, who's had a long road to come to this point with much adversity between losing his ride with Michael Waltrip and nearly, going back to working on the piers in New Jersey to align himself with Barney Visser and Furniture Row Racing, aligned with Toyota. We know his struggles at home with his girlfriend Sherry's in a battle with cancer. Barney Visser is battling heart disease and wasn't able to make the finale. But just kind of everything just kind of aligned right there for Martin. Didn't have the best car at the end of the day, but he was able to drive a heck of a race and hold off a charging Kyle Busch and win this thing. It's just a really feel-good story for NASCAR after this long season. So, Gray, Richard, you guys have been following this thing all year long. You're both deeply involved in the sport, so I'll start with you, Gray. What are your thoughts on Mr. Truex, Furniture Row Racing, Toyota, and just this great Cup they've won?
Well, definitely, the feel-good story, like you said, and really deserving that they won it. They dominated the races all year. They won. This weekend was their 8th win of the year, 8th win of the season. They've led more laps than any team, and they came each week to race. They came each week with a plan to qualify as well as they could and to lead as many laps as they could. And obviously, with a break here or there, they could be sitting with 10 or more wins on the season. So yeah, it was and a team that's overcome a lot of adversity off the track too, which has been well publicized. But to set the stage for Miami, the championship 4 all qualified and practiced pretty well. I think Keselowski was a little bit down on speed during the week, but he still made his presence known. And all the championship 4 ran in the top 10 most of the day, and tried some differing strategies throughout the race to kind of, put themselves in position. Early on, Truex didn't have the best car, but as they've done all year long, they didn't give up. They worked on their car and got it better as the day progressed. Kyle Busch's car, the 18, was probably the best car overall all day. There was a stretch in the race where the 4 ran pretty good. but they were all on a little bit different strategies. Some cars ran well on the right out of the gate on short runs. I think Harvick's car was very good on short runs at the beginning, but it seemed that Kyle Busch his car would really come in, and he was really set up for the long run in the race. Another car that ran pretty well, that had a good season, the 42, won the first two segments of the race pretty much in dominant fashion. Faded a little bit there in the last section there. I think again a little bit on strategy, but it was able to rally and finish third. And I thought it was very telling that you had probably the three best cars of the season, the three best teams when you look at it. The 78, the 18, and the 42 finished 1, 2, and 3 as it all came down. But the last pit stops really kind of set the stage. Kyle Busch tried a little bit different strategy than the other two, and Truex was just able to make his car work, and he got a little bit of a lead. Kyle Busch was held up a little bit trying to get around the 22, which he wasn't too happy about it. But there again, Joey Logano read the entry blank, which said it was a race, and that's what he was doing. He was racing.
Good point.
So and so it was Kyle's job to go ahead and dispose of the 22 as fast as he could. He didn't, and it may have cost him. But good story. Truex wins it. Good story for that team. And when you think about it, the 78, this is only their 8th year of full time as a full time team in the Cup Series. I think their first full time year was 2010. I think I forget what year it was, but Regan Smith won for them at Darlington, won the Southern 500 for their first win, and then they had a few lean years. Truex got the ride there. They had their first year together was not very good. In fact, it was very tumultuous, and they had a lot of bad luck. The next year they came along, and several years later, they came along and won 4 races, and of course this year they really came around and were the dominant car. In fact, they had some good races last year, but they were just struck by bad luck race after race, and really should have probably done better than they done. But they served notice last year that they were going to be strong this year, and they were able to prevail.
And strong they were all season long. Yeah, I mean you can't. This is a team that they said, oh, you can't do that. You can't base your team way out west in Colorado when everyone else is right here in the hub of NASCAR in the Mooresville, Charlotte area. It kind of reminds me of other guys that said, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. And they said, well, let us just do it our way. And they did. Now, Richard, you've watched this all year long, too. What are your thoughts and your comments on Furniture Row Racing, Toyota, and Martin Truex?
We've often talked on this show, especially in sort of the realms of Formula One, about executing a race weekend. And, what they did this weekend was a perfect example of that. They went out and they executed perfectly. They did what they had to do. They knew they had a quick car. They knew they had a package that was, would enable them to win, and they didn't make any mistakes. They had a couple of slightly iffy pit stops, but nothing catastrophic. There was a late race caution which sort of jumbled up that strategy call by the 18 by staying out longer than the other 3 contenders. So potentially there could have been interesting there to see what would have happened if that caution hadn't come out and that strategy call had played itself to its to the end of the race. But no, they deserved it more than anybody. It was very effective, very efficient, very clinical, and I don't think anybody can genuinely knock what they've achieved there. I think one thing you hinted at there with them basing themselves out in Denver, Colorado, saying that you can't do that. Well, it'd be interesting to know how many people they have working for them that are not sort of diehard NASCAR employees. How many people that they've employed that have come in from outside of the sport? just to see and get an idea of how many, how many fresh ideas they've brought in. I think often it can be, oh great, well, we hire in people from other teams. Well, sometimes that's half the problem. Sometimes you may need fresh blood and fresh ideas to come in and see what goes on there. But no, you can't knock them. They've done a fantastic job this year.
I agree with what you just said about that too, and I can attest to a little personal knowledge. When many years ago, when Bill Davis was forming his team, Bill came to North Carolina, and in the beginning, when he started his team, we ran the Busch Grand National Series, and he ran it out of his shops in Arkansas. Of course, we just did it part time. But when Bill decided to go and go full time and start a team, he came to North Carolina, and we rode around. I rode around with him in different areas looking for shops and stuff. And Bill decided to move his shop to High Point, North Carolina. And one of the reasons he did not want to be down in the Mooresville, Concord, or Charlotte area. He wanted his race team and the things that he wanted to bring to the sport to be proprietary. And a lot of that is being segregated from the other teams. When you would go down to Charlotte and Mooresville at that time, most of the race teams were all located in one big business park. All that meant all the teams, they'd go to lunch at the restaurants around there, and they would intermingle. And really, stuff that you wanted to keep secret didn't stay secret, and things like that. And people would, and racing is a migratory sport anyway, and people would move around, for $50 to $100 more a week, and push their toolboxes literally down the sidewalk from one shop to another. And that's one of the things that Bill didn't want to get into. He wanted to kind of create his own identity in an area, and I think it worked very well for us. We were in High Point. The closest other shop to us was Petty Engineering in neighboring Randolph County, and then we had Richard Childress Racing on the other side in neighboring Davidson County. So we were kind of, the three teams, we were kind of out on an island, each of us. But I think all three teams were successful in their own right doing that. And there were always the naysayers that said, no, you've got to be in Charlotte because that's where the workforce is, and this is where this is, and where this. I'm going to tell you something. Bill had the idea. If you create a good environment and you pay these guys well, they will come and work for you anywhere you set up. And that's the truth. And that's kind of what Barney Visser's done out in Colorado. He's attracted people, and I think they've cherry-picked some people. Cole Pern was a former engineer at Richard Childress Racing. And a few guys that work for them are former RCR employees, and that was the tie-in because early on they were one of our alliance teams for several years. And so, but then they got other guys like Richard alluded to from outside of racing and brought people in where they could train them and indoctrinate them into the culture they were trying to create in their shop. And I think they've done a great job. The results speak for themselves.
Oh, without any hesitation. And when you consider all of the logistical negative aspects of being based out there, then they must be doing something else different from all the other teams to offset those negative connotations. So I think they've got a really good bunch of guys there. And as you say, I've worked with some of them when they were an alliance team to RCR, and they're pretty switched on, those guys out there.
Yeah, and they do things smart. They work smart, and I can tell you for a fact, when they were one of our alliance teams, we benefited, or at RCR, we benefited as much from aligning ourselves with them as they from us, in the creativity that they brought to the table and the things that we learned from them. We provided them with chassis and engines, and we had a technical sharing thing going on there. But we learned from them too, and when they were one of our alliance teams, Richard will tell you, they performed well.
I mean, they won Pocono, didn't they? And was it just Pocono, or did they win 2 that year? I think it was Pocono, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think they won Pocono, and in an Alliance car, and basically, we pretty proud of that from our RCR standpoint, because they took our equipment and they kind of nurtured it on their end and won the race. So it's they're in their own little world, but racing's changed a little bit in the day, and the UPS truck goes there just like it comes to our shop. And of course, with the Toyota program that they have, all the engines for the Toyota teams are done in Costa Mesa, California. So all those engines are shipped into the teams, to Joe Gibbs and to them. So that's not much of a problem. And they have direct contacts. And Toyota has liaison and people working directly with each team. And then, of course, I do believe they got their chassis and stuff from Joe Gibbs. So basically, that they probably helped Joe Gibbs a little bit too in the performance as well. So it was a total effort for Toyota. And let's not forget that not only was it Furniture Row, but Toyota. Hats off to those guys too, because they really they won the Manufacturers Championship, I think, for the second year in a row, and really put their money where their mouth is. I mean, so to speak, with the resources that they've given those teams. And Richard can talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at you look at the way Toyota have come in and with an aim of the sport and to win multiple championships now. They've certainly checked a lot of the boxes that they would have set out when they first came in. So they've got to take a lot of credit for that. And money talks in this sport, and there's no doubt that Toyota do put a lot of money in. They have a huge engineering background that they push very, very hard. And credit to them.
They've set the bar.
Oh, without any hesitation. And unfortunately, it's up to the other organisations now to realise where that is, and look at how they run the sport. And I think there's a sort of a trade-off that people have to be very careful with. I think more than any of the other two manufacturers, Toyota look at this with their motorsport history and their motorsport background as, they would, some of the other racing series around the world. They go out there and they execute in a very professional way, and they are an engineering-based company. And maybe within the hierarchy of NASCAR, there's a little bit of pushback on that. They don't want NASCAR to become trust me, it's a long way off it, but a Formula One style sport where its engineering budget dominates. But it is going to happen. There's a fundamental issue here, whereas if you give a company like Toyota a budget, and within the Toyota hierarchy, they will have a budget, and they will turn around and say, we are going to spend X number of tens of millions of dollars a year on a NASCAR project. If you turn around and say, oh, you can only spend $2 million a year in wind tunnel time, they'll find another way of spending money. And if they limit that, they'll find another way of spending money. These companies that people criticize for spending too much money and say, oh, they need a salary cap or a payment structure or spending structure. There are ways around it. There always have been, and there always will be. And they will spend it no matter what you do. You'll get in a scenario where you say, okay, you can only spend, X amount. Well, then it'll turn out that the engines become free. But then you'll divert all the money into marketing, which then gets back channels through into engineering. There is nothing that they can do. So I think NASCAR is at a crossroads here. They either need to embrace the engineering side of NASCAR, or they're in danger of alienating the fan by turning around and saying, oh, this is pure racing, this isn't purely money-based, or this isn't purely engineering-based.
Right,
when it is that.
Richard, I want to touch on something there because you just mentioned alienating the fan, right? And, you know, me, I'm the odd type of individual that likes to torture myself by reading social media comments on NASCAR posts on social media. And there's this undercurrent among the fan, the you know, not folks that are deeply involved in the sport, but more of the casual watcher, that somehow Toyota is funneling money into NASCAR, and NASCAR is helping them out. And of course, you and I, Gray, all know that's not the case. Toyota is doing their homework and doing a good job of what they're doing. But you know, when you're talking about alienating the fan, and you've still got some of this post-World War II anti-Japan sentiment that still crops up every now and again from some folks. But
that's
I can tell you the Toyota Camry is manufactured 20 miles north of me in Georgetown, Kentucky. But Toyota,
you mean you don't live in Tokyo?
No, I live in Kentucky, and we make Toyotas right up the way. And I'll tell you this, I know this for a fact, Toyota is one of the most wonderful employers in the area. They take care of their employees very well.
They do.
On a side note. But
here's what,
and we've, so there's, people have seen the Toyota banners on the Daytona project, where they built the new grandstands, and there's a Toyota thing, and it's like, so Toyota's not paying NASCAR so much as Toyota has bought into the sport, and Toyota's done their homework. So,
but what
do we need to do to change public perception of this?
Well, let me just talk to you about that, Frank. All these manufacturers have to pay NASCAR.
Absolutely, yep.
They all pay NASCAR. And Toyota paid NASCAR a bunch of money when they came into the sport because that's what NASCAR does. That's how they operate. Ford pays them. Chevy pays them. Look at all the stuff. I mean, Caterpillar pay. All these sponsors have channel money into the sanctioning body. You go to the racetrack and you look at all these trucks that show up at the racetrack and safety vehicles and everything. You think NASCAR's gone and bought those things? Hell no. Toyota or Ford or Chevy or somebody has brings those manufactured vehicles into them. So NASCAR's all the time working their angle with the manufacturers because they think it's their sandbox and it's their forum, and the manufacturers are going to benefit by racing in their forum, so they're going to have to pay to do it, and that's the way NASCAR looks at it.
But I think that's part of the problem.
But part of the problem is that some folks who just watch, and they're not involved, they believe that Toyota has paid NASCAR enough
it's the same folks
to guarantee the win, which is ridiculous, right?
It's the same folks that come to you and say, well, so-and-so's a great little driver. So-and-so needs to put him in a car.
Right.
They don't understand.
They're the same ones that when the driver they don't like wins, they say, well, that team always cheats.
They don't have it. They don't have a sense of the economics of the sport.
Not at all.
They have a simplistic view of it that this is the way it happens, and well, this guy's a great little driver. Somebody needs to put him in a car. Well, yeah, if he can come up and bring money to the thing, somebody will put him in a car. But nobody's going to just. It's the days of somebody just plucking a kid off out of a dirt track somewhere in Georgia and putting him in a car are long gone. Those days will never come again. I mean, in a lot of the things, it's just simple. I mean, economics and like Richard alluded to, it's an arms race, and it always will be among the manufacturers and the teams. The money they get, they're gonna spend it, every dime of it they can, to prevail in the sport. And it's no different than really it's ever been. I think it's magnified more now because there's more money out there, and people are grasping and embracing the technology. The stock car hasn't changed in 40 years. We're still running the same platform basically that we ran 40 years ago. It hasn't changed. The front suspension is based on that of a 68 Chevelle. The rear suspension is based on that of a 65 Ford Galaxy with Chevrolet truck trailing arms. That's a given.
But what happens, and the problem that you're seeing is, as Gray mentions, everything's so, basically antiquated, for want of a better word, in these cars.
But we've embraced the technology to understand
exactly
what we're doing now that we did not have years ago.
So all of the what you'd call the low-hanging fruit in terms of technical development has gone. The really simplistic things that a half-decent engineer with, a good concept of vehicle dynamics can work out without the need for these advanced simulation tools and without the need for these, complicated algorithms and wind tunnel time and stuff like that. They've worked it all out. So all of those are gone. So where you gain an advantage now are these small little intricate details that cost ridiculous amounts of money to find, 1 or 2 points of downforce that in the past you'd find 15 points of downforce in a wind tunnel session. Now you're finding 1 or 2, but it costs the same amount to go to the wind tunnel because they're not as obvious or as easy to find.
Right. And also understanding the interface between the mechanical and the aero. There's a lot of little tricks that we spend money on that actually we can make the car do something mechanically that enhance it aerodynamically. And these are things that we understand more now because we have tools, or we're using tools that didn't exist years ago, or techniques that have been developed, in the not too so distant past.
I mean, you go back 3 or 4 years ago in NASCAR, and the area of underbody aero was still very immature. The concept of having a flat floor underneath the car was a novel concept. Now, in the last 3 or 4 years, that's been hit, quite extensively. And now the teams are getting to a position where they've probably got 90 to 95% of the underside of that car pretty flat. Right. And I mean, they're using engine blocks and steering arms and center links and all these sort of parts to get their aero parts as much as they are mechanical parts. So,
they've redesigned components on the engine for aerodynamics. Right.
And now those areas are becoming, everybody's started to fill out those areas. It's like, well, what's next? Oh, well, we can adjust this little widget to make that flat. Well, that's $100,000, whereas the other bits are going to be $5,000 because they're getting smaller and smaller and more intricate.
Right. The thing the teams have to ask themselves now: what is the saturation point? What is the point? Yeah, what is the point? What is the best that we can make this? What is the best?
Exactly. But
and then work backwards, because you're going to spend. If we can only improve this car X amount of counts of downforce, and we've maxed out, are we going to spend millions of dollars to do this, or we're going to take that money and since we've almost at saturation point, transfer that to another area?
Now you see, the problem with that is, and we have a saying back in England, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas. Everybody in England eats turkey for Christmas dinner. So it's like over here it'd be like turkeys voting for Thanksgiving. These teams,
Richard, I thought people ate figgy pudding on Christmas.
Well, yeah, but figs can't really vote, can they?
I just had to throw that out there.
It's when you go for a bit of spotted dick that it gets interesting.
Okay, off topic, but let's get back to race cars.
Anyway, sorry, there's your British colouring lesson for the day.
Thank you, sir.
But no, NASCAR is a dictatorship to a certain extent. NASCAR, obviously, they can make the rules as and when they see fit. However, the teams there is a council of team owners and the like, and they vote on the rules. So if you've got Toyota who have a budget of, I'm going to use an arbitrary number, I don't know, $100 million a year, and you've got Ford whose budget is $75 million a year, Toyota aren't going to turn around and say, "Oh, we need to cut back on the R&D money." They're going to want to encourage it because they know they've got more money. So who's going to be the one that turns around and says, "We can't develop in this area. We're going to take this tool away from you," when the teams themselves are the ones that have invested, tens of millions of dollars in the area? They're not going to take it away from themselves. So it's a very, very difficult argument for the teams to settle, because at some point they're going to turn and say, "No, we've got Toyota has a clear advantage in this area, so we're not going to vote to get rid of it."
It's a good point, and even to the point of Mr. Brad Keselowski, who was one of the three that did not win the thing.
Well, he was one of the 39 that didn't win it, wasn't he?
Well, he was one of the three eligible that didn't win. Yeah, you're right. But he chalked the thing up to manufacturer advantage. Kyle Busch chalked it up to Toyota chalked it up to Joey Logano's fault. But Keselowski, mentioned the manufacturer advantage, and he said it earlier in the season that Toyota has the manufacturer advantage, and Keselowski said, Chevrolet's got a new car coming out, and Ford's going to be another year with their new car, so they're probably going to have to sit and lose for a whole year. But I guess it is what it is. If your manufacturer's behind the curve there, but
no, it's because they've done their
homework. They've done their homework. Of course,
yeah. They've spent the money to do it. What that does is they've set the bar. It's Ford and Chevy's deal now to either put up or shut up. You've got to keep up.
Yep.
Let me. NASCAR does everything they can to do to put us in a box and create parity. These cars, we use a common template on these cars now. The common overall template, the silhouette or the greenhouse, is the same for everything. They use the same template to measure all these cars. Each car has their own identity kit for the front and the rear. So these cars blow the baseline car that they present to NASCAR, Ford, Chevy, and Toyota. In the wind tunnel, they blow similar numbers, the baseline car. The teams then get them and refine them, and the manufacturers do that, working with the teams to refine them even more. Because those templates, that grid template is only made up of about, 40 templates that go over the car. They don't cover every square inch of that car. There's a lot of area in that car that you can work on to enhance it aerodynamically. And that's what these teams work in. They also put these teams in a box when it comes to engines. That's why stuff has to be approved a year or more in advance before we can, we have to use that approved part. Then again, the same thing applies to the engines as applies to the body. The individual teams get together with the manufacturer and they work on enhancing those products underneath the rules, because these cars are stringently inspected. And that'll go against the grain, too, of these conspiracy theorists who say that, they turn a blind eye to this and a blind eye to that. Hey, teams try to fudge and try to pull the wool over NASCAR's eyes. Sometimes they do. A lot of times now they don't. But that's part of the game. But, NASCAR has tried to create as much parity in this sport as they can. It's up to the teams and the manufacturers to work within their rules to maximize their product. And basically, Toyota has done that. They've taken what the rules have allowed and they've maximized it. Ford, Chevy have to go back to the drawing board and go back to work. And I have no doubt that they won't. I mean, look last year how well Penske ran in the Ford, the cars ran there. I think over the winter you're going to see Penske's going to up his game. They're going to go to work. Stuart Haas will go to work, and the Fords will probably come out of the box showing some gain next year. Chevy's going to have to do the same thing. They're really stoked about this Camaro and the promise it shows in the wind tunnel. So I'm sure that they're looking forward to going and thinking they're going to gain next year. But by the same token, Toyota's not going to rest on their laurels. they're going to be doing the same thing. They're going to be taking and improving on their product that they race with this year. So it's dog eat dog, as it's always been. But you go back to the old days when before there was the common template and the rules were less designed for parity. We'd go to Daytona every year, and the Fords, the Chevys, all the manufacturers, the Dodges, they all had distinctively different looking cars. And the cars would show up at the test sessions in January, and test. And teams would sandbag. And NASCAR would immediately, before they came back to Daytona, they would start making concessions in the rules package for certain makes and certain manufacturers. And it really scrambled the rules. You had different rules for the Fords and different rules for the Chevys and different rules for the Dodges. And it was no way that you could ever create parity. And it was always one manufacturer had an advantage over the other. And that was just the way it was then. NASCAR tried to get away from that by creating the common template and creating the cars like they are today. They've done a pretty good job at it, but still, there's the arms race that's always going to prevail. People aren't going to sit still and rest on their laurels.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's get off this topic of the manufacturers because that's a great topic. But let's talk about some of the other stories coming out of Homestead. Namely, one of the bigger stories, Dale Jr. His last ride. It wasn't fantastic. I think he finished 21st. But again,
he had a good race then.
Had a good race, yeah. But but what he's meant to the sport and he's captured the imaginations of a huge fan base. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has a fan base that rivals some of the smaller market NFL teams, and he's bowed out in fitting fashion. Martin Truex, who was good friends with Dale for a long time. Dale brought him into the sport, gave him his first opportunity, first ride. Dale walks away, cracks some cans of beer with his crew because he can, and walks away on his own terms rather than leaving last year after the concussion protocol. So, a couple thoughts on Dale Jr. because a lot of folks are down on him now and again because he hadn't won a championship, hasn't won a ton of races, but he's had a pretty darn good career for sure.
Oh yeah, he's won 28, 29 races in his career. He's won 2 Daytona 500s. He's a 2-time Busch Series champion. He's got a Hall of Fame career, no doubt about it. He will eventually make his way into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. He has been an ambassador. More importantly, he's been an ambassador for our sport.
And he'll continue to be an ambassador for the sport.
Oh, yeah, for years to come. He's a 14-time most popular driver. He'll probably get his 15th most popular driver award when that's announced next week.
You think?
I'm not. People will debate all the time, and we talk about fans and their view of the sport. And there's a large contingent of fans out there that think the sport began in 1979 when Dale Earnhardt Sr. entered the fray. But there are significant figures in our sport that have helped it grow. Richard Petty probably being the most significant figure ever to do that, to help this sport grow. Dale Earnhardt was the next one to come along to help it grow. And obviously, Dale Jr. Kind of took up the mantle his dad had and did the same thing and brought it to the masses. And you've got to give him credit for that and what he's done for this sport. And this sport's going to miss him. And it will probably go through a period of a few years before someone else emerges to take up that mantle again as the most popular driver. And it'll happen. I mean, it's a generational thing, and we'll see that again. and someone else will come to the front. But Dale, during his career, he after his dad died, he was able to fill that void and help this sport move on and move along. And I, for one, having worked in this sport, am grateful for what he's done and for what he's brought to the sport.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you cannot discount his contribution to the sport in no little sense. He's meant a lot to the sport, and just the sheer size of his fan base,
right.
and folks are worried about, well, what's next? Now Dale's gone, but you got really good young drivers, like if you look at a Kyle Larson or a Chase Elliott, or even look at Martin Truex, who's got some ties. Some ties to the Earnhards, having driven for DEI and aligned with Junior, yeah. So,
and you throw along too. We've gone through a period of time here in the last several years that Jeff Gordon has retired, Tony Stewart has retired. We're losing Matt Kenseth at the end of this year. We're losing Dale Jr. and was announced this weekend. Also, Danica is gonna retire from the sport coming up. So that's a big hit for what we have known in racing for basically the better part of 20 years. Most of those guys, and again, I speak of that as a generational thing because I've been involved in this sport a long, long time. I've been in it for 33 years, and I was a fan for many, many years before that, and I'm still a fan of the sport, but we saw drivers in the 60s leave the sport in not so good circumstances. We lost them to fatality. We lost them, in fatal accidents, and we lost guys to retire. We saw drivers retire in close proximity in time, and the sport survived. Another generation of drivers came along and picked up the mantle and carried it forward. And like you said, the sport's in really good hands right now. We've got a lot of young talent out there that I think is gonna go to the forefront. We've got kids like Ryan Blaney, like you said. We've got Joey Logano. We look at Joey Logano like he is a veteran because he's been around a long time, and he has, but he started so young. He's relatively young. Kyle Busch is just beginning to get to the prime of his career. We've got Kyle Larson. We've got Chase Elliott. We've got guys like Eric Jones coming into the sport, and still more coming along. So I think the sport's in a good place. I think fans just need to accept it and appreciate these guys for what they're going to bring to this sport.
Absolutely. You think about some of the guys that have come through the sport. Mark Martin, Ricky Rudd, Rusty Wallace, all these guys that were big stars of their day, and
they all had to start somewhere.
So you got all these young guys. So I agree with you, Gray. The sport's in good hands. Richard, any comments on the future of the sport before we get into talking about what's next for Danica?
The only minor comment on some of these guys that you mentioned as the future of the sport, and I mean, from a talent pool, I think it's pretty immense. Some of the drivers we've got coming through. I mean, you just look at who Hendrick are picking up next year. I mean, Chase has done a couple of seasons, but he's still pretty early in his career. To have William Byron, Chase Elliott, and Alex Bowman there. I mean, there's three precocious talents there. You're not going to find much better than that. But my only comment would be, you look at Dale Jr. and he can talk to anybody. He's got the, for want of a better, the gift of the gab. He can talk all day long. You don't get that with some of these guys. They're very sterile. They're very bland. And I mean, sometimes you listen to Chase Elliott in an interview and it's like, oh my goodness me, spit it out, lad.
Yeah.
Say something that engages the fans.
Yeah.
You're not going to, you could see Dale Jr. go into the crowd, grab a beer out of a cooler and drink with some of those guys and just talk for hours about nothing.
Yeah.
Chase would have to
He was an everyman, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, I struggle to see where that's coming from now, especially with a lot of these guys coming through who have had that, this isn't being disrespectful, a slightly more privileged background who expect, they have their entourage with them and they have their yes men and they have their PR people and, they're disconnected from the normal fan. Yeah. And that's my only concern about these people, that, the future of the sport.
And I agree with you to a degree. Some of that is it. I think one of the kids that I think is going to be more like Dale is Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney has that same quality as Dale does. He's very, he just a regular guy. He interacts well with the fans. He talks well. He's a fun-loving guy. You know what I'm saying? And he projects that image where a lot of the other guys are more buttoned up, more homogenized, if you will. Yeah, and I think that's something that they will find their way a little bit as they go. We'll see what happens. But what you said about the guys kind of use it as a segue into the next thing. We talked about some of the young guys, and we can also kind of use that to talk about the Xfinity championship and the truck championships that were decided this weekend at Miami. Also, we had young guns prevail in those series. William Byron in the Xfinity, Rookie of the Year, won 3 or 4 races and the championship. And then we had Christopher Bell win the Truck Series championship, and he won 4 or 5 races in that series and was able to win. So these are young guys that are coming and going to be names in the future as well. And obviously, we're going to see William Byron graduating rather quickly up to the Cup Series next year. So it's a youth movement in NASCAR right now.
Yes, absolutely it is. Yeah. So we'll see. William Byron is going to be in the 24 next year, right? Because they're going to move the number. He's taking over Casey Kane's ride in the 5, but they're going to renumber 24.
They're just going to swap numbers, yeah.
And Chase Elliott's going to take over his dad's old number,
number 9.
Bill's number 9. Yep. And then you've got other guys out there, and I believe if I read it correctly, Roush is doing a driver development thing where they got Austin Cindric in there and a couple other guys, and they're going to rotate the number 60 car in the Xfinity.
Yeah, I haven't heard. I'm not. We're missing Seth tonight, and he could probably bring us more up to speed on that, and we'll have to get him to kind of help us with that next week.
Right. And by the way, I want to wish Seth a very happy birthday.
Seth, good for him.
Rush Racing has announced a driver development program where they're going to take a couple of these guys from the trucks and late models and rotate them through the season in the Xfinity car. And one of those kids is Austin Cindric, who's son of Tim Cindric, who's the president of Penske Racing. And Austin was pretty good in the trucks this year. He's had a couple of Xfinity.
He made it to the championship 4.
Made it to the championship 4, yep. Pissed off Christopher Bell in one race.
So it was a good season?
It was a very good season, yeah. So, and he's had a couple of runs in Xfinity as well. So those are all young guys coming up through the sport who are going to fill all the voids left by all these other guys leaving. Because, Jimmy Johnson doesn't have that many years left either. He'll be the next one to bow out before you know it. So
I think I heard somewhere he's got 3 years. I think he's going to do 3 years. From that,
I heard that same thing, Richard. I think I heard leading up to the final race that 2020 will be his last year in Cup. Is what I was hearing. So which makes sense. 2020 got 18, 19, and 20. So 3 years. 3 years, and he'll hang up his helmet. And I think, like I said, we've all alluded to Jimmy's probably signed. Jimmy signed his last big contract, as have a lot of these drivers. And we talked about this several weeks ago. There's a new business model coming with in NASCAR with how things are going to be done. We've been talking about manufacturers spending money and this kind of thing, but also the car owners and the money that they're going to have to spend from sponsors is going to change a little bit. We've talked about that, and it's going to be affected by dwindling TV ratings and dwindling attendance. So this sport's going to be under a little bit of an adjustment to some degree, and I think drivers, where it's been more of a driver's market for the last 20 years. The pendulum's going to swing back a little bit to where it's going to be more of an owner's market, and we're going to see probably talent come into this sport a little quicker than we have in the past, and these guys are going to come in because they'll be more affordable to the owners. So that's something we'll need to look for in the coming years as well.
Yeah, and along that note, it's like we've been talking about Kurt Busch all year long. That it was like announced months and months ago that his option was not picked up by Stewart-Haas, but at the same time, Stewart-Haas said they intended to retain Kurt Busch. But now we are at the end of the season, and there's nothing solid, nothing saying that we're okay bringing Kurt back in. And I watched a piece today on NASCAR America on NBC that maybe Kurt's not their guy. You guys hearing anything about that, or?
No, just still as the 41 is an open seat, as is the 27. The only thing that we know that was really confirmed, and it was confirmed I think before we went on the air last week, that the 10 seat has been settled on, and that's going to be Eric Almirola in the 10 car that Danica's vacating, and that brings us to Danica.
And let's talk about Danica.
Yeah, and her announcement last week, where she has obviously there's not a ride on immediately available on the horizon for her, probably due to not being able to put a sponsor package together to put her in one of these open rides. So Danica has probably decided, somewhat reluctantly, that she's going to call it quits after next year, and she announced that she plans to run the Daytona 500 and the Indy 500 in 2018 and hang up the helmet.
And the interesting thing there is that she doesn't have a ride or a sponsor confirmed for either one of those races. Now, Hey,
I'm going to do the Daytona 500. Anybody else going to do it with me?
I'll change your tires, but don't guarantee I'll get. If I get 4 out of 5 lug nuts, that'd be okay.
That'd be fine.
I think.
So
I honestly think
the undercurrent thought is that Chip Ganassi is maybe behind this, but Chip confirmed.
Well, I heard Penske might be behind it.
Yeah. No. Penske.
I heard Penske.
No, Penske confirmed that he wishes Danica well, but there's no room on his team for her.
Yeah, but
Mike Hull, who is Chip Ganassi's chief engineer, he pretty much said there's no room for Danica on their team either. Andretti Racing said there's no room for Danica on their team, but they wish her well. Which leaves, as far as for the Indy 500, perhaps Schmidt-Peterson Motorsport, who had that little deal with Didier Camel's fall through, there could be a spot there for her.
What do you think?
Perhaps,
if you had to lay odds on her being in the Indy 500 next year, if she's putting it out there, the odds are good. Somebody's going to come up with a ride, and it'll be funded.
Yes, if it's funded, yep. But she's not.
And I tell you what,
she's not going to be. She's not going to be in a Penske. She's not going to be in an Andretti car. She may be in a Ganassi car because those guys are a little cagey about saying what's going on. But Mike Hull is saying no. Chip Ganassi is saying, yeah, we talked to her. So I don't know. But I think
she's apparently there's something going on.
Well, worst comes to worst, the IndyCar series will throw some money at to get the gimmick. But
For
I'd love to see her.
event.
She may be in a driving Reinbold car. As a teammate to Sage Karam. But I'd like to see her in a top car. But for her to just say, "Oh, I'm going to run Daytona and Indy without a rider, without a sponsor to announce," she must know something.
That's my feeling. She knows something, and there's something brewing out there. And obviously, for Danica to do a one-shot race at in the Indy 500, which, that's going to be a big deal in itself if she goes to Indy and tries to make the show. That's going to be a big media splash. You know it will. It'll create a lot of attention. It'll be good for Indy. Let's face it. It'll be good for the Indy 500. It'll be good for IndyCar.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just like Alonso going last year, it'll be big. It'll be big news. So yeah, I think a lot of people will probably be in on that deal, and they'll make that deal happen. So like I said, she must know something. I don't think she'd just get up there and throw that out. So something's going on. Somebody will work out something and get her in a car for Daytona, which, obviously if she can come up with a sponsor for one race, which, there's lots of people out there in this day and time that'll make that happen for her. So, but yeah, I wish her luck. I think, she's just at a crossroads now. Looking at it, she's 30. How old is she? She's 35. Is that correct? 35, 36?
Yeah, somewhere right around there, yeah.
And I'm sure, she, at some point in time, she's probably serious about, settling down, getting remarried, and possibly starting a family, So, that's all those things, have a shelf life, and you gotta, she's at that point now. She's got to start thinking about things like that.
You know what? I was at the 2005 Indy 500 when Danica was a rookie, and she qualified on the front row and she led late in the going. I've never heard that place explode so much with applause and screams as when she took the lead late in the going. Mind you, history will tell you Dan Weldon won that race, and Danica was on the cover of Sports Illustrated the next day. So Danica's good for the sport. She's good for Indy. I've met Danica a couple times. I like Danica. I'd love to see her get one more shot at an IndyCar. She's going to be rusty as hell, though, after, 5-6 seasons in NASCAR?
Oh, somebody will put her in a seat, and she'll knock
no. Somebody will put her in a seat, no doubt, but I'm just...
She'll knock some of the dust off.
She'll knock the dust off, yeah, so... But, good on her if she gets it all together and runs those two races. It'll be a nice send-off to her career. But, the poor guy who got a quiet send-off to his career was Matt Kenseth.
Yeah,
so
but
he was just kind of lost in everything else. But
that's totally in character of his career.
Yep, yeah, he's been kind of a quiet guy. Yeah, he's the guy he's the guy that won the championship on one win, and that started the chase.
Terrific
consistency.
But he's another Hall of Famer. 39 wins, 39 Cup wins.
39 Cup wins, Daytona 500
That's pretty good. 39 Cup wins and 2 Daytona 500s and a Cup championship. That's Hall of Fame credentials all day long, and he'll definitely probably be a first ballot inductee. No doubt about it. But there again, he was never flashy. Just a work. He'd come in and give you a workmanlike job, do his job, win races. He was talented, and he did it. But he didn't. He wasn't one to, be on the out front of the camera and all that. He just came to the racetrack. He did his job. He was a racer, and so he's kind of going out like he came in.
Yeah, and one interesting note on Kenseth, because he won race just a couple weeks ago. He's the only guy that has won a Winston Cup race, Nextel Cup race, Sprint Cup race, and a Monster Energy race. He's won in all those different
formats.
Yeah, different sponsor naming things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
how about that?
Yeah, that's how long his career spanned, and he's been that consistent for that long. And to see him win just recently, good on him, good on Matt. I've told you this before, Gray. When I was living in Wisconsin years ago, somebody told me at the short track in Kaukauna, keep your eye on this Kenseth kid because he's going to be the next big thing in NASCAR. Sure enough, 25, 30 years
came
later.
Came in as a Martin protege.
Exactly, yep. So.
Yep. Martin was really high on him and convinced Jack Roush to hire the kid.
And the kid did good.
And the rest is history. Yes, it is. Yeah, he's had a great career, nothing to be ashamed of. Obviously, he maybe didn't go out on his terms or ideally on his terms, but nothing to be ashamed of. And like I said, most definitely a Hall of Fame career.
Absolutely. Now, Richard, we've got one more Formula One race this season going on.
Yep.
NASCAR's done, IndyCar's done, but Formula One's got one more race going on, and the championship been decided for, a month now, right?
Yep.
So the news story I heard was Robert Kubica signed a 2-year deal with Williams. Then the other news story I read said Williams denies signing Robert Kubica. So what do you make of this? You think we're really gonna see Robert in a Williams car next year, or not?
Without any hesitation, they wouldn't be running him in the Abu Dhabi test again for the third time if he wasn't capable of driving, they would have worked it out by now and they would have binned him. And all these leaks, it wouldn't be the first time that Williams have screwed up a contract negotiation, would it now, really? I firmly believe that he signed a deal for them. There could be some clause in there, depending on how he does in Abu Dhabi. It could be one of these stupid things that the contract doesn't actually become active until the 1st of January, so therefore Williams says, the contract's not, whatever. They have these weird ways of getting out of actually confirming things that they don't want to confirm. I think he'll be there. I think he'll be good. I think he'll do well. I think it's a great move for the organisation. As an organisation, Williams is sort of they've had this sort of cyclic sort of existence over the last 10 years or so. I mean, you go back to 2012 when they won in Barcelona, and they had Maldonado had some good results and probably could have done even better if he'd kept the thing on the track and not driven into people on a few more occasions. And then they lost the way a little bit there for a few years when the Renault engine sort of dropped off the chart a little bit there, and then you saw them come back with the Mercedes engine deal and the Martini branding, and then had a couple of good years there. And now they've dropped back a little bit. I think this, Kubica coming in could be the sort of shot in the arm that team needs to push it back up against, push it up past, the likes of Force India and some of those teams that have been beating it, but arguably they should be ahead of.
Yeah, and as you and I have talked about, speaking of, they've landed they've set their future on Lance Stroll, who's, he's got some talent, yet to be seen, but obviously his family is helping fund the team, and to have a guy like Robert come in there to mentor this young kid who's just learning the sport. Roberts knows the intricacies of the sport. He knows the tracks, and he was one of the best out there. And he wasn't in the best car all the time. So I think that's a win-win for Stroll and his family and his thing there.
Sure.
Just to have a little mentor right there.
Yeah, and as you say, it gives an opportunity for Lance to learn from an experienced driver. I mean, and goodness me, if Kvyat went in there, I mean, hey, Lance knows how to crash all by himself. He doesn't need anybody else helping him.
Well, Lance and Danny could, crash into one another.
Exactly.
And just, give the engineers, and the mechanics lessons on how to put the cars back together.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if anybody remembers this. Look this up on YouTube. There was, I think it was Pastor Maldonado. The first year he was with the Renault team after he left Williams or Lotus or whoever it was at the time, and it was at one of the early races in the. I'm going to say it was a Chinese Grand Prix, and he crashed getting into the pit lane, and at the time when he crashed, they were the TV was showing a camera from inside the Lotus garage with all the mechanics watching the TV as he crashed on the entry to pit road. And one of the mechanics just turns around and gives this fantastic look to the camera. It's brilliant. You just couldn't make it up. It was priceless. And Kvyat's almost getting that sort of Maldonado-style reputation. And I think Kubica is a far better pick for that seat.
Yeah, so now what do you think for Danny Kvyat's future? Because is that the end of the line for him?
I think so. I mean, he's been fired by Red Bull 3 times. You thought they'd get the idea by now, wouldn't you? He's done. Pure and simple.
You seem like a Dale going to IndyCar if he, brings some money to the table.
Yeah, maybe he'll bring some money in there. Visa may be an issue for him, but I'm sure he can get that sorted out.
Or, sports cars or whatever. Or you think?
He could do the World Endurance. Look, what we've got to be, and I hate myself when I do this, but everybody sits around and criticizes these drivers. Jeez. They are 10 times, 100 times the driver you or I are. So it's very easy. Oh, exactly.
He made it
very, very easy to sit here and say, oh, well, so-and-so's a terrible driver. No, he's not. He is a damn good driver. Is he in the world's top 20? Sorry, chap, you're not. He's just not. He's a good driver, but he's not, he's not in that league of F1 drivers, I'm afraid. And he'll go somewhere. He'll have a good career in World Endurance or IndyCar or DTM or V8 or whatever he chooses to do. But Formula One, no. Just unfortunately had his chance. Not his deal, I'm afraid.
All right. So speaking of Formula One, it looks like Gasly and the kid from New Zealand, his name escapes me right now. Help me out.
Brendan Hartley.
Brendan Hartley are going to be solid for that lineup for next year. Is that what you're hearing?
Yes, yeah. I think those two have been confirmed. Which again, Brendan Hartley. I mean, that's a left field pick there. I mean, it really is. I mean, he was part of the Red Bull Junior team. I'm going to say 8-10 years ago, something like that, and just didn't. Was again a quick driver coming through the junior categories and just. Didn't really make the grade, and off he went to do, endurance racing, and right place, right time with coming in to replace Sainz there. I mean, wow, all of his Christmases came at once right there, didn't they? Good luck to him.
No, good for him. Yeah, this guy, he was like pegged to be Scott Dixon's teammate at Ganassi Racing and IndyCar Series, and suddenly he's got him Formula One ride. So he's like, sorry, Chip. So
see you later.
But I hope that works out for him. He's done well in sports cars. So
yeah.
But anyway, gosh, we're up against the clock here. Are there any more final thoughts we have for tonight? I'll go around the table. I'll start with you, Gray.
Oh, well, there's really no final thoughts this weekend. It's no racing this weekend other than the F1 race.
And that's not really racing, is it? It's going to be procession at Abu Dhabi. Let's be honest.
But at least it'll be cars. at least it'll be cars, and we can finish off the season watching that, and then we go into the off season. And of course, we've got the Cup banquet coming up, which I don't think anybody really watches much of that anymore, but nothing really no news will come out of it. Championship's already been decided, and all they'll do is pass out checks and stuff like that. And none of them have my name on it, so I really don't really don't have that much interest in watching that. But we're about to put the wraps on another season of racing. It'll be done, and we'll take a little bit of downtime and enjoy the holidays, and we'll be right back at it. I believe we're less than 90 days away from the Daytona 500. Some between about 80, 88, 87 days, something like that. So and that's going to come and go very quickly.
And in between there, we've got the Rolex 24, where Fernando Alonso
Yeah,
will run that.
Yeah.
Alonso's
We'll
gonna
be
run
excited
that,
about that. That'll
That'd be
probably
a good
be
one,
about the time. Be about the time we probably go back on the air from our winter hiatus.
Yep, absolutely. So, Richard, final thought for the evening?
Probably the first time in about 40 weeks that we won't be saying Truex is going to win this weekend.
Okay.
But actually, he probably will. He'll probably get a drive in a Formula One car and just go and win that race as well. It's been a these NASCAR seasons, they do tend to sort of drag a little bit, but it was a good finish, and the right guy won. They did what they needed to do. So congratulations to those guys. They've they beat everybody else. They showed everybody else how it's done, and it's up to the other teams and the other manufacturers to go out there and build a better car. So well played to them, and congratulations. But next year's another year, and everybody will be pushing quite hard to go out there and get their name on that trophy.
Oh, absolutely. My last thought for the evening is Martin Truex, good on him. The right guy won. Everybody's going to be gunning for him next year. I hate that the racing season is over, other than the procession coming up in Abu Dhabi next week. But, guys, I enjoy talking to you every week, and we'll be back on next week. And to the Whoobazoo Radio Network, I thank you. To iHeartRadio, I thank you. And SoundCloud, I thank you. And we'll talk to you all next week. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Whoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.